In a dimly lit room at the Grand Hotel, New York City, in the winter of 1942, an aging man held a small, antique recording device in his trembling hands. Nikola Tesla, 86 years old, had secretly summoned a young journalist for what would be his final confession. The scientist, who had revolutionized the world with his discoveries in electricity, was about to reveal something he'd kept secret for decades, a truth that transcended all known science. Tesla looked out the frosted window, watching the pigeons that visited him daily. His eyes, still bright despite his advanced age, carried the weight of knowledge he'd never dared share with the world. On this somber afternoon, he finally decided to break his silence about his deepest and most mysterious experiences. "You know," Tesla began, his voice raspy, "throughout my life, people have seen me as a man of science, someone who dealt only with frequencies, voltages, and magnetic fields. But there's something I've never told anyone, something I discovered many years ago that completely changed my understanding of life and death." He paused, gently stroking a white pigeon that had landed on his arm. Animals sense death approaching, not just their own death, but the death of people they love. And what I discovered about this goes beyond any conventional scientific explanation. The journalist, initially skeptical, sensed something in the inventor's voice that made him lean forward, preparing to hear a revelation that could shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew about reality. Tesla continued, his long, gnarled fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air, as if connecting the points of a cosmic equation. The inventor returned to his chair, his eyes fixed on distant memories. "This intrigued me deeply. How could an animal perceive someone's death thousands of miles away?" I began to investigate, not just scientifically, but spiritually. I discovered that many ancient cultures already knew this truth. The Egyptians revered cats precisely for this ability. Native Americans considered animals as bridges between the worlds of the living and the dead. Tesla picked up a specific notebook, its pages yellowed with age. "I spent years documenting similar cases. I met an elderly lady in Colorado Springs who had 12 cats. All 12 gathered on her bed the night her husband died in the hospital, miles away. They formed a perfect circle around her, as if performing some kind of spiritual protection ritual." The scientist paused, his eyes reflecting an almost supernatural light. "But what truly convinced me that I was dealing with something beyond material science was what happened with my white pigeon. You know her, don't you? The pigeon that visits my window every day for years." Tesla pointed to the bird that remained calmly on his arm. "This pigeon is not just an ordinary animal. She's a messenger between worlds." The journalist observed the pigeon with renewed attention, noticing something peculiar in her eyes, an intelligence that seemed to transcend ordinary animal consciousness. Tesla continued his narrative, now in a lower, more reverent voice. Nikola Tesla stood again, walking toward the window. "She began to fly in specific patterns, drawings in the air that I recognized immediately. They were the same patterns I had observed in electromagnetic fields, but organized in a completely different way. It was as if she were showing me a map, a diagram of invisible forces that connect all living things." The scientist turned to the journalist, his eyes shining with an almost feverish intensity. "At that moment, I understood. Animals don't just sense death approaching. They are able to perceive alterations in what I call the universal consciousness field. Every living being is connected to this invisible network of energy, and when someone is about to make the transition from life to death, specific waves are sent through this network." Tesla opened another notebook, revealing complex diagrams that mixed scientific formulas with seemingly mystical symbols. "I spent decades trying to map this network. I discovered that it functions similarly to electromagnetic fields, but operates at a much subtler frequency." The inventor pointed to a specific diagram. "Look here. When a person is dying, their consciousness begins to gradually disconnect from the physical body. This process generates energy waves that propagate through the universal consciousness field. Animals, which don't have the mental and emotional barriers that we humans develop, can perceive these waves clearly. Tesla pointed to a specific diagram. Look here. When a person is dying, their consciousness begins to gradually disconnect from the physical body. This process generates energy waves that propagate through the universal consciousness field. Tesla closed the notebook and walked to a shelf where he kept various strange objects, crystals, modified coils, and devices that seemed to have been built for unknown purposes. He picked up a small crystal, holding it up to the light. But there's something even more extraordinary. Animals don't just sense death approaching, they can also perceive the presence of spirits of people who have already died. My white dove showed me this definitively. Tesla sat down again, his voice taking on an almost whispered tone. 3 weeks ago, she arrived accompanied by another dove, a male, with very specific markings that I recognized immediately. It was identical to a dove I had fed years ago, but which had died. It couldn't be the same animal, but the markings, the behavior, even the way it tilted its head, everything was exactly the same. The inventor paused, observing the journalist's reaction. You might think I'm delusional, that age is affecting my mind. But what happened next proved that I was dealing with something real and extraordinary. The two doves began to fly together, performing a complex aerial dance. And during this dance, I began to hear sounds, not with my ears, but with my mind. Tesla put his hand over his chest, as if feeling something deep in his heart. They were voices, voices of people I had known and who had already died. My father, my mother, fellow scientists, friends from my youth. All speaking at the same time, but harmoniously, like a celestial choir. And they were telling me that my time on Earth was coming to an end. The scientist looked directly at the journalist, his eyes reflecting a deep serenity. I didn't fear fear. On the contrary, I felt immense peace. I understood that death is not the end, but a transformation. Consciousness doesn't die with the body. It simply changes frequency, moves to another level of existence. Tesla stood up and walked to a table where there was a strange device, a combination of coils, crystals, and wires that formed a complex geometric pattern. In recent years, I've been working on a secret project. It's not a machine in the conventional sense, but a consciousness amplifier. Something that can help humans develop the same spiritual sensitivity that animals naturally possess. The inventor activated the device, which began to emit a low, harmonious sound. When this device is running, I can perceive the same waves that animals feel. I can detect when someone is about to die, I can feel the presence of spirits, I can even communicate with consciousnesses that have already made the transition. Tesla paused, looking at the device with an expression of deep respect. But I discovered something even more important. This ability shouldn't be a privilege only of animals or people with special equipment. All human beings were born with this sensitivity. We just lost it throughout development, blocked by our materialistic education and our limited beliefs. The scientist turned off the device and returned to his chair. Young children have this ability. They frequently talk to invisible people, predict future events, demonstrate knowledge about things they've never learned. But as they grow up, adults convince them that these experiences are just imagination. Tesla smiled sadly. My white dove is trying to teach me to regain this natural ability. She shows me that death is not something to be feared, but a return to the original state of consciousness. When we die, we simply go home. The inventor looked out the window, where several doves had gathered, as if waiting for something. I've noticed that more and more animals are appearing around me. Not just doves, but cats, dogs, even birds I've never seen in the city. They all seem to be waiting for something, and I know what it is. Tesla turned to the journalist with a serene smile. They are preparing me for my own transition. Just as my cat Midnight sensed my father's death, these animals are sensing my imminent departure. But this time, I can feel it too. I can perceive the changes in the universal consciousness field. I can hear the voices of those who have already departed calling me. The scientist picked up a sheet of paper and began writing rapidly. I want you to publish this, but not now. Wait until after my death. The world isn't ready to accept these truths yet, but the time will come when humanity will need to rediscover its connection to the spiritual realms. Tesla handed the paper to the journalist. In this document, I explain how people can develop the same sensitivity that animals possess. These are simple techniques based on meditation, observation of nature, and opening one's consciousness. Anyone can learn to perceive the energy waves that connect all living beings. The inventor paused, as if listening to something only he could perceive. Ah, they're calling me again. The voices are getting clearer. He closed his eyes for a moment, a smile of profound peace illuminating his face. My mother is there. She tells me there's more important work waiting for me on the other side. Tesla opened his eyes and looked directly at the journalist. You must be wondering how you can be sure all this is real, that it's not just the hallucinations of an old man. The answer is simple. Observe the animals around you. They are your best teachers about the mysteries of life and death. The scientist slowly rose, walking to the window where his white dove awaited him. Pay attention to moments when animals act strangely. When a cat refuses to enter a specific room, when a dog barks at nothing, when birds fly in unusual patterns. They are perceiving presences or energies that you can't detect with your physical senses. Tesla gently stroked the dove, whispering words the journalist couldn't quite hear. Learn to observe without judging. Learn to feel without rationalizing. Learn to trust your intuition as much as you trust your logic. Animals do this naturally. That's why they are so wise in spiritual matters. The inventor returned to his chair, but there was something different about his posture. He seemed lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. There's one last thing I need to tell you. In recent months, I've been having visions of the future. Visions of a time when humanity will rediscover its connection to the spiritual realms. I see people developing psychic abilities, communicating with spirits, using consciousness as a technology more advanced than any machine. Tesla smiled, his eyes shining with an inner light. Animals will be the teachers in this new era. They will show us how to perceive subtle energies, how to connect with the consciousnesses that inhabit other dimensions, how to understand that death is only a change of state, not an end. The scientist picked up another notebook, this one even older than the previous ones. Here are recorded all the experiences I've had over the years. Communications with spirits, visions of other dimensions, techniques for developing extrasensory perception. Everything has been tested and documented with the same scientific rigor I applied to my electrical inventions. Tesla handed the notebook to the journalist. Keep this safe. The time will come when humanity will need this information. When people begin to question whether there is something beyond the material world, when they begin to realize that conventional science has limitations, then it will be time to reveal these secrets. The inventor paused, looking at his hands with an expression of deep contemplation. You know, throughout my life, people have called me a genius. They said I had an extraordinary mind, that I could see things others couldn't. But the truth is, I simply learned to listen. I learned to pay attention to the signals the universe is constantly sending. Tesla looked directly at the journalist, his voice taking on a more urgent tone. This is the most important message I can leave for humanity. Learn to listen. Learn to observe. Learn from the animals. They know secrets we have forgotten. They know how to navigate between worlds, how to perceive the presence of the invisible, how to feel the energy waves that connect all things. The scientist rose once more, walking to a bookshelf where he kept several personal items. He picked up a small wooden box, opening it carefully. Inside was a small white feather, clearly from a dove. This feather belonged to the first dove that visited me, Tesla explained. I found it the morning after my vision about the Universal Consciousness Network. Since then, it has been my talisman, my reminder that there is much more to reality than our eyes can see. Tesla held the feather up to the light, revealing intricate patterns that seemed to glow with their own light. Sometimes, when I'm meditating with this feather in my hands, I can perceive the thoughts and feelings of the animals around me. I can feel their compassion, their wisdom, their deep connection to the mysteries of existence. The inventor placed the feather back in the box, closing it with reverence. Animals don't fear death because they know it's just a transformation. They realize that consciousness is eternal, that only the physical body is temporary. That's why they can sense when someone is about to make the transition. They recognize the signs of the soul preparing to return to its original state. Tesla returned to his chair, but this time he remained standing, leaning against the back. In the years following my departure, I want you to observe animals with new attention. Observe how they behave in hospitals, how they react in the presence of sick people, how they act in places where deaths have occurred. You will begin to notice patterns that will confirm everything I've told you today. The scientist gazed out the window at the setting sun, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange. There's a beauty in the way animals accompany us on this journey. They are our spiritual guardians, our guides between worlds. When a person is dying, it's often an animal that first recognizes the presence of the spirits who come to receive the soul. Nikola Tesla sat slowly, his movements revealing the weariness of a long and intense life. I've witnessed this many times. Cats positioned near the deathbed, staring at specific corners of the room as if seeing invisible people. Dogs that begin to wag their tails for no apparent reason, as if greeting visitors we cannot perceive. The inventor closed his eyes for a moment, as if accessing deep memories. I recall an occasion when I was visiting a hospital in New York City. There was a cat that lived there, a feline who had a habit of lying on the beds of patients who were about to die. The nurses called him the death cat, but I realized he wasn't an omen of gloom. He was a comforter, a spiritual companion assisting souls in transition. Tesla opened his eyes, revealing a depth of understanding that transcended his scientific knowledge. This cat taught me something fundamental. He showed me that animals not only sense death approaching, they also serve as bridges between worlds. Their presence eases the passage of souls, making the transition smoother and less frightening. The scientist leaned forward, his voice taking on a confidential tone. There's a reason why so many ancient cultures regarded animals as messengers of the gods. They truly are intermediaries between the physical and spiritual dimensions. Their consciousness operates on frequencies that allow them to perceive realities that are normally beyond our perception. Tesla paused, as if listening to something distant. I can feel my white dove calling me. She's telling me it's time to begin preparing for my own journey. In the coming days, more animals will come. They will form a circle of protection around me, helping my soul gradually disconnect from the physical body.